Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our publishing and coaching services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Dr. William Bradford, who is currently writing his first book on personal motivation. William, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Are you ready to get started?
You bet. Let's have at it.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, Paul, I tend to kind of get a little disorganized in my own head, and I don't know if other writers can relate, but, I tend to do an outline, just to get my thoughts in my head organized, and I think just getting organization of your ideas, I think, is key. And to follow up, I think, just being authentic, being yourself, and having a proofreader, and an editor on hand, I think is something that has helped me, along my early journey, and that would be, in my mind, that's what stands out first, honestly, is keeping it simple.
Absolutely. Simplicity is key.
Yes.
Well, what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published so far in your author journey?
Well, having to explore, the different routes and whatnot, it really kind of depends on what avenue you want to take. This is probably going to be, a one book deal for me. Between the traditional route, I really don't see my book ending up on, some of these major major bookstores across America. I am really looking more towards the ebook route, which is, as we both know, I really believe is the more trendy approach. To read books these days, even though I'm a little too old school. I prefer the more traditional, round. But, to be honest with you, after reading and researching my stuff, it's become, even more increasingly more difficult to go that route because, the price of ebooks is a lot cheaper for one. But look, a really good website for the listeners. I don't know if you've heard of this or not. It's called Honkiat, I believe. It's spelled Hongkiat. It's all one word, and it kind of gives you a list of ebook sites that you can go and visit, and and you got to keep in mind in a situation like ebooks, they typically keep about 10% of your earnings. So I think that either the independent route, obviously, is the third route. Would be very difficult and I think very time consuming just for myself. I mean, others, it may be just right for them to actually do their own publishing and do their own marketing to get it out there,
So these websites that you mentioned, these are sites that you would send your book to, and it's kind of like with Amazon with their version of KDP, and then you're just going to upload them to those different sites. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's correct. And I didn't want to mention names because I don't know what kind of, things we cannot say here on your podcast. But yes, Amazon is definitely one of them. Kindle is another one that's mentioned on this particular website that I mentioned to you. And that's, that's the route I'm going to take. It's only because, I'm not out there to make a killing on this book. I'm not out here to make it my life's work. I'm just out there for people to, gain the experience off of, what I have to share, with them.
And then with your book, you are going to have it on Amazon, correct?
Yeah, as of currently, yes, I am.
Cool. Because the reason I mentioned that is Amazon, as you know, they have the lion's share of the sales. I mean, they're the ones that created the Kindle. So it's one thing I always emphasize is always leverage Amazon as much as you can with your launch, because that is one of the largest search engines on the planet. I think Amazon, Google, and YouTube are considered the top three right now. So to have your book out there in Amazon definitely makes the difference. Are you going to have it available in Kindle and also in paperback as well?
Paperback is going to be, that's kind of a toss-up at this point, to be honest with you, Paul. I think, like you said, Amazon is the number one. But, I can't be sure as far as paperback yet, to be honest with you. It's such a tough journey to go down, especially when you haven't been published before. Your name's not out there. I don't have a big name, and, no one in my family has ever been published. And so, yeah, this is besides an academic publishing, this is a whole new deal for me.
Hey, I understand completely. It's always scary putting yourself out there. 3 years ago when I was doing my first book, it was the same way, where I just decided, I have so much going on, I'm just going to have the book available in Kindle. And then that was actually one of the things I realized, oh man, why did I not have this book available in paperback? So 2 months later, I actually had the paperback version created. The funny thing is, it's actually really easy to do it. In fact, there's a YouTube video, and the lady who did it is named India Drummond. And you can type her name in YouTube, and it's going to come up, and it actually will give you a video guide on how to create the book into a paperback version. It literally takes, the first time you do it, probably takes about an hour to 2 hours, but you can actually do it yourself, or you can send it to a freelancer and they can do it for you. But one thing I would recommend, it's always good to have your book at least in 2 different formats, at least have it available in Kindle and paperback. Another thing I always recommend, if you're comfortable doing it, is to have the book available also as an audiobook. What I did for my first book, for Eat Less and Move More, I actually did a royalty share agreement with Audible. Now, with Audible, if you make it exclusive to them, if you actually do it yourself or someone else do it for you in that role, then they will take 40%. You'll get 40% of your royalties. However, if you actually go to Audible and go, hey, I want one of your narrators to do it for me, and I want to hear different people audition, they will actually set it up where people will audition to be the narrator for your book. Now, the good thing about that is it's all profit, because you don't have any costs. The only drawback is when the book does come out for the audiobook version, then it's a royalty share where they'll actually get 20% and you'll get 20%. But the good thing is that you're already making a profit after your first sale. So just something to think about. I did that for my first book, and then for all my other books, I actually recorded them myself, believe it or not.
Well, it's actually a really good idea and a really good piece of advice. You can learn anything from YouTube these days. It's been out since 2006 or something. But no, to be honest with you, that actually never even crossed my mind. Throughout this whole entire process, I haven't even attempted to do that. I just, Google has been my main search, and that's it. But I think that recommendation is something I'm definitely going to take it hard for sure.
It's definitely worth at minimum checking out, because one thing I always emphasize to my clients is it's all about the revenue streams. And when you have a book launch, I can tell you, when you launch your book in Kindle and when you're doing your launch strategy with utilizing that specific area, it also brings along the paperback version of the book as an extra person in the ride, so to speak, because people will buy the paperback version of your book. And that's the thing. You have people that like Kindle, you have people that like paperback, and you have people that like audiobooks. So my philosophy is you want to serve everyone, where you want to have your book available in as many different formats as possible, just because, the younger generation, they like the audiobooks. I don't want to say necessarily the older generation, because I'm a little older myself, but I like the traditional paperback book. I like to read paperback. So I read paperback, I read Kindle. I'm not really a big audiobook guy, but I want to make sure for my people out there, for my readership, for my tribe, that we have that available in all different formats. So it's just something to consider, but I would definitely recommend at bare minimum, have your book available in Kindle and have your book at paperback. And if you get stuck, after this podcast, we can talk about it. Feel free to reach out and I can actually send you some resources, because you definitely want to have your book at minimum available in Kindle and also as paperback.
That's excellent advice, Paul. And you know what? My wife, all she listens to is audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, like I said, one thing that didn't cross my mind, but I don't like audiobooks myself at all.
Me neither.
but that's all she listens to. I mean, it's kind of her thing. I mean, instead of music, she listens to whatever audiobook she gets. But
Well,
that's all right. So it's just to each his own.
well, and I was going to tell you a funny thing too. One of the other thing that's changed a lot now. I don't know if you have one of these, but I have the Alexa, the one that does like the voice commands and everything in the house. And one of the things
Sure.
you can,
Oh yeah.
well, and with Alexa and Amazon Echo and a lot of these other, like Google has their own version of it now. And one of the things that they can do is actually stream audiobooks. So that's another thing that people are utilizing it for. Like, hey, Alexa, play me this audiobook, or play me this file, and it actually does it. So that's one of the other game changers, where it's not only where you can listen to it in your car or listen to it on your phone. You can actually have Alexa or one of these other versions of the program. They will actually play your audiobook through the house. It's really a crazy thing.
That is, and it's something that is becoming so mainstream anymore. It's kind of hard even for me. Me being in 42 years old, I kind of have difficulty with some of these. Between Echo and all these other ones. Gosh, I mean, it's getting a little crazy, but that's interesting. I had no idea that you could do that. And that's excellent advice as well. As it tells you, I still have a bit of research to do myself before I launch all this.
Well, it definitely is a process. And to transition that a little bit, I'd like to ask you to please share a marketing strategy that you're planning to use in your book launch that you feel is going to work well. So have you thought about marketing so far with your upcoming book launch?
I have, and I'm really using a lot of my own personal credentials to market the own book. I mean, I have this sort of unique approach, I guess, as far as marketing is concerned, because, just a little quick bit of information here, I was a PGA golf professional turned doctor turned, I'm now a caregiver for my disabled stepdaughter. So, I kind of have this whole long list of different things going on, but I really think that is really kind of my marketing strategy at this point, it's just because of all the, just the different hats I wear, I guess, so to speak, at different points in my life so far. And it's, something I think it's very relatable. And that's where I kind of use, my own, I guess, credentials, I like to put it, as my marketing tool.
So do you have any specific strategies that you're going to utilize? I know you mentioned that with your past and everything, with being on PGA Tour and doing everything with that, is there any certain strategies that you're going to use with leveraging that, or are you talking about leveraging your networks that you've built over the years?
I think leveraging the networks I've definitely built. I think, LinkedIn's incredibly important, and I think getting advice and even getting, tidbits of, my book onto LinkedIn, and just to see what people have to say, and I think, marketing is something, relatively new to me. I'm not a business major of any kind, and so I think that, learning that route is kind of, like I said, and I'm trying to, kind of use, my name for a decent kind of intro, into it, but, knowing, not only I'm a medical doctor, but there's always, there's a whole different side to it. And so, and being a motivational book kind of makes it a little even stranger, but it's, but to be honest with you, LinkedIn, in my opinion, it would be a great marketing source. I'm sure, have got a lot better information, I would assume.
Well, one thing I'd mention too, you brought up a great point, and that is in regards to repurposing the content from your book. And I think that's a great point. Utilizing it on LinkedIn, maybe utilizing it in the post on Medium. Medium's a great outlet to use for blogging, having it also available on your own site. So that's definitely a great way to utilize it.
Right.
I'm also a big fan of utilizing different promo companies. For my clients, we have book launches that we do for them where we actually utilize over 20 plus promo companies. So it's one of those things where it's just like a song where you want to build it to a crescendo,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same strategy when you're doing a book launch where you want it to peak at a certain time so it can peak, and then that actually triggers the Amazon algorithms to help too, which also puts your book in the customer's also bought area and different areas where it's going to peak in regards to your sales rankings as well in the different categories that you choose. So there's definitely a lot of different ways that you can utilize that. But I really like your idea about repurposing your content and dripping that out to your people on LinkedIn and other social media outlets. It's a great strategy.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm hoping, and just from your advice alone, I think it's going to be priceless, honestly, at this point.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it? And by the way, this is typically the hardest question of the show.
Well, it's really not too hard for me, because I think this guy's, phenomenal. He's an eccentric guy. This is an old book. Can't find it online. Oh, you can find it online. You can't find it in the bookstore. But Up in the Old Hotel, Joseph Mitchell. It's fiction. He is an American writer, best known for all of his published work in the New Yorker. This book, it contains all these short stories, but oh my gosh, just tremendous. He talks about, salon keepers, from street preachers. The Seafooditarian may be my favorite little short story. It's about a guy who thinks he can go on this seafood diet to keep alive for another 2 decades. But the way he writes it is tremendous. By far my favorite book. And look, when you go through medical school and you read as much as you do and all those things, you're kind of burned out for a while. You don't want to read anything. And now this will definitely blow your hair back. It will. Phenomenal.
What would you say is the number one thing that you learned from it?
I would say would have to be, how he can actually take, the author can take something so incredibly ridiculous in the short stories, some of these crazy things, and he can make the plot flow so seamlessly. It blows my mind. It truly does, and it's a must read. I've put it on my list. Not only on LinkedIn, but just family in general. It's so well written, and it's the type of style you don't see nowadays, in a lot of different books. But now, that's, sorry to tell you, hands down my favorite.
Excellent. And what is your favorite quote and why?
I tell you what, my sister married a Green Bay Packer player. He was very famous in the 80s, early 90s, Brian Noble. He played outside linebacker for them, started all 10 years. He gave me a bit of advice when I was kind of going through a very egotistical stage. He told me, you pass the same people going up as you do going down. Now, that is sort of something you have to kind of read very carefully to understand it. I've used this quote to people before, and they look at me like I'm stupid, but you have to read into it, because in life, and it's happened to me, I'm not ashamed to admit that at all. I think humility, I think, is something that I have fought over the years, and this is a thing I keep going back to, and you have to. In my mind, but the greatest thing that it may have taught me, humility, honestly, is it, and there's it's a really a dog eat dog world. It's everybody's kind of trying to outdo one another, and you just have to make sure that you pass the same people going up as you do going down. So you gotta be very careful not to trot on too many feet, because this could be, it could be very disastrous for your career, when somebody else pops up. So that's something that I'm just want to, reiterate. I think it's a very powerful little statement he told me, and to be honest with you, I don't even know where it comes from or the origin of that little saying.
Well, and I've heard some different variations of it. It's funny you mentioned that. We had a meeting at our Chamber of Commerce last week, and a buddy of mine and I were talking, and there was some talk. There was people talking on there that felt like they were a little bit, I don't want to say above their station, but they were, it was very clear that they didn't have that philosophy. So we just turned to each other like, like Kendrick Lamar said, sit down and be humble. So I agree with you completely. It's one of those things where you never know who you're going to deal with. So my philosophy is treat everyone the same, treat everyone fairly, and with the same level of respect. Titles don't matter.
That's true. And you know what? It is incredibly hard to do, and you know it.
Yeah.
And, it's incredibly hard to do, to maintain that, be kind. And, I'm going to say, look, we're all going through struggles. Every single one of us has our own problems, and I don't care who you are. I mean, yeah. So that relates to really everybody, anyone listening, if that matter.
Well, William, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
Yeah, if they want to reach me online at any time, I check my emails quite frequently. I try to get them, get to them first thing in the morning. But the first one would be wrbmd@yahoo.com. Or the LinkedIn profile that I have. Forgive me, I do not have the URL. It's if you type in William Bradford MD, it'll pop up. But a halfway decent-looking man with a beautiful wife. I think we're standing next to each other at a wedding, so I'm not hard to find. So either way, you can connect to that.
Well, William, I want to thank you again for
send me a message.
Okay, cool. Yeah, they can definitely do that. I can send you a message there for sure. I want to thank you once again for being on the show, William, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Paul, thank you so much, and I want to thank you for your advice, and I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. I appreciate all the help.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.